Okay, we're back. So as I was saying before the computer hung up, don't be afraid to remultiply. It's an easy check. You should be able to leave this next test 100% sure whether you got a problem right or wrong. Okay, so do your first, your inners, your outers, your lasts, or outers, inners. I guess inners, outers would be FEOL, not FOIL. So you can always check. I'm not going to check just for time's sake, but that's not because it's not important. All right, so if you have a question, ask it. If not, exercise 1 right next door to the right is waiting for you. I'm going to give you 30 or 40 seconds to make an attempt. All right, so here goes. I'm going to unfoil this. So here's my 2 sets of parentheses. My firsts are y squared. So my only choice for firsts are y times y. All right, tell me, what are my signs going to be? Both positive. Why is that? Why are they both positive? Because the positive 14 tells me they both have to have the same sign. Either 2 negatives or 2 positives multiplied together. The plus 9 tells me they're both positive. And then what are the 2 factors of 14 that are going to add up to 9? 7 and 2 or 2 and 7. It absolutely does not matter which one you put first. There we go. Y plus 7 times y plus 2. Does somebody get something different that we need to talk about? Okay. 4 times 5 does not multiply to 14. That's the key. So remember that what is driving our choice of numbers is this right here. We want to know the factors of this that add up to 9. So where you start is with the end number. I see why you picked 4 and 5, but you don't. This does not drive the bus. The 9. Yes. It does not. This is the exact same thing. Okay, so if you had done this and instead put the 2 here and the 7 here, that's absolutely the same thing. Yes, great question. All right, do exercise 2 right down below. All right, let's see how you did, and then you can give me some feedback if you need to on where you're struggling with this process. Again, if I'm going too fast on this, slow me down. Don't be afraid to just say, hey, hang on a second. So I'm going to unfoil these 2 things. So my firsts are x squared. The absolutely and only choice is x times x. That's why we start with the problems that have a 1 in front of the x squared, because it limits the choices. My signs, again, are going to both be positive, because the plus in front of the 36 says they have to have the same sign. And then since they add up to a positive 13, they're both positive. And then what are the 2 factors of 36 that add up to 13? 4 and 9? Okay, that sounds good to me. 4 and 9. If you said 6 times 6, well, 6 times 6 does give you 36, but it only adds up to 12. It's not the right pair of factors. So then you know you've got a lot of 2s and 3s that make up these 6s. So you just rearrange your factors until you figure out 4 times 9, in case you had forgotten that. All right, exercise 3, right next to it, I've changed one little bitty bit about it. So make sure you're paying attention as you do that problem. All right, I'm going to unfoil this. So here we go. Once again, there's a 1 in front of my x squared. So the only choices there are x times x. Here's the one little bit of difference. What are the signs going to be this time? Not a negative and a positive. It's a good try, because if I was to multiply a negative times a positive, what would the sign be on this last term? Be a negative. We're going to get there. You're just a step ahead of me. They're both negative. Remember, this 56, we multiply to get this. Okay, we multiply to get that 56. It is positive. So that means either both numbers are both positive, so a positive times a positive gives me a positive 56, or they're both negative, because a negative times a negative gives me a positive 56. And what determines it is I need a negative 15. And what are the factors of 56 that are going to add up to 15? Okay, 7 and 8, or 8 and 7. The order is immaterial. There you go. All right, well, don't worry. You get another chance at that same sort of thing. Do exercise 4 for me. Here we go. I'm unfactoring, I'm unfoiling, unmultiplying, I'm unsomething. So my firsts, again, it's 1z squared. So my only choice is a z times a z. What are my signs going to be on this particular problem? Both negative, because I need to get a positive 20 when I multiply and a negative 12 when I add. So they're both negative. And what two factors of 20 are going to add up to 12? 10 and 2, or 2 and 10. The order of those two numbers is immaterial. One more, and then I'm going to do another example. We're going to continue talking about signs. So finish up our same sign problems with exercise 5. All right, so one more time on my same sign problems. I've got a 1 in front of the x squared, so x times x. This is a positive 6. It tells me the signs have to be the same. This is a negative 5. It tells me they both have to be negative. And what are the two factors of 6 that are going to add up to 5? 3 and 2, or 2 and 3. Order does not matter there. Okay, so we have done extensively. We've done 6 problems of what to do when your lasts are positive and you have the same sign. So I'm going to do the next example, example 3, right below it. So notice this time in example 3, My lasts are now a negative 20. What's the only option for signs when you have a negative that I need to multiply and get? Perfect. One has to be a positive times the other has to be a negative. There's no other choice. So my x squared here is x and x. It does not matter, just to answer a question from before, it does not matter with whether you put the positive or the negative first. Okay, I'm just going to go positive, negative, but if you already wrote down negative and positive, leave it, it's fine. But you got to adjust your mindset a little bit, because now I need the two factors of 20. But now, since when they had the same signs, I wanted the two factors of 20 that added to something. When my numbers have different signs, I want the two factors of 20 that have a difference of 8. And what two factors of 20 have a difference of 8? 2 and 10. Which one gets to be the positive one and which one gets to be the negative one? That's fantastic. Why did you pick the positive for 2 and the negative for 10? Perfect, because the 8 has to be negative. So the negative value wins. Okay, so the negative 10 plus the 2 gives me a negative 8. So let me just say, if you put the negative first, okay, you have to attach the proper sign with the proper number. Okay, so if you put the negative, then it's x minus 10 and x plus 2. Notice it's the same two factors, just in different order, negative 10 and plus 2. All right, so give exercise 6 a try. Same thing, you just get to practice it now. All right, here we go. I'm unfoiling. My x squared, since there's a 1 in front of the x squared, my only choice is x and x. What are my signs? Yep, this is a negative 8, so it's got to be a positive and a negative, or a negative and a positive. The order is immaterial, but once you've declared your order, the number you put with the positive and the number you put with the negative does matter. And what are the two factors of 8 that are 2 apart? 2 and 4. Which one's positive? Which one's negative? Excellent. Anybody struggling? Anyone not understanding why the signs are a particular way? All right, just a couple more of these to practice, and then we will head to our next step. So exercise 7 right below it. Please do that one. All right, so we're unfoiling again. My y squared has a 1 in front of it, so that's y times y. What are my signs going to be on this problem? Yep, one of each, whatever order you choose. And then what two factors of 21 are 4 apart? The positive goes with the 3, the negative with the 7, so it can add up to a negative 4. All right, one more just for kicks. Go ahead and do that last problem right there. So here's my two parentheses because I'm unfoiling. My firsts are x squared. So again, that's x and x, only choices. My lasts are negative. So that tells me positive and negative or negative and positive. Doesn't matter the signs. And what factors of 33 are 8 apart? 3 times 11. And which one's positive? Which one's negative? Positive 11, because this time the positive number wins because I've got a positive 8 in the middle. Okay, so I feel like we did a whole bunch of problems when there's a 1 in front of the x squared. Anybody got a concern or a comment before we move on? All right, so flip the page. Oh, I guess I felt like one more was necessary, so go for it. Hitting it even harder than I thought. All right, so I'm going to unfoil one more time. So t squared is t times t. It's a negative 30, so that tells me my signs are a plus and a minus, or a minus and a plus. The order doesn't matter. And the two factors of 30 that are 1 apart, I'm pretty sure everyone would tell me 6 and 5. Which one gets to be the positive and which one gets to be the negative? Positive 6 and negative 5, because I should end up with a positive 1. All right, so the next thing I wanted to comment on is, okay, sometimes a problem will have a variable on the lasts. So what to do when you have a variable here? Okay, that's the next detail that I wanted to add to our factoring session here. Well, don't change anything. Okay, I will show you what to do with our very last step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unfoil in my usual way. My x squared, since it has a 1 in front of it, the only choices are x and x. The 16 has a negative in front of it, so my signs have to be a positive and a negative, or a negative and a positive. The two factors of 16 that are 6 apart are going to be 2 and 8. The 8 gets to be positive because we need a positive 6 at the end. And then here's the very last thing. Since I've got a y squared there, the way I'm going to deal with that is I'm going to put a y after one term and a y after the other. So I've got positive 8y and negative 2y. That's the only added detail there. So again, I just want to make sure that you're reinforcing what I'm talking about, because I'm good at factoring. I want to make sure you are. So do exercise 10, please. All right, so this next one, I'm unfoiling. I've got a 1 in front of the x squared, so x and x. My signs, as has been true for the last several problems, are going to be different, positive and negative, or negative and positive. Two factors of 24 that are 5 apart are 3 and 8. So the 8 is negative, the 3 is positive. And then the very last thing is I've got that y squared to deal with. So y squared becomes y times y. Okay, so really not a whole lot different than what you were doing aside from the y squared. Is that complicating things for anybody? Do we need to talk about it? All right, one more problem then like that, and then we're going to deal with what happens when there's a number that's not 1 in front of the squared term. So do exercise 11, please. All right, so here we go. One more final time, a number that's 1 in front of the squared term. So a squared is going to be a times a. My signs are going to be a negative and a positive, or a positive and negative. The order doesn't matter. What are the two factors of 27 that are 6 apart? Okay, 3 times 9, I'm going to make the 9 negative, the 3 positive, so that they'll add up to -6. And then I got a b squared here, so I put a b at the end of each of those. Hopefully that's enough examples to help you feel confident and to remember or to learn, if this is the first time you've seen it, how to factor something when there's a 1 in front of the squared term. So that takes us to the next thing, which is what to do if there is a number other than 1 in front of the square. Okay, so that's what the rest of our time together is going to deal with, is this situation. What to do when there's a number other than 1 in front of my square term. Well, the first thing to do, as evidenced by these first 2 problems, is check for a common factor. Just like we spent our time last Tuesday doing. Check for a common factor. The problem might not be as difficult as it first appears. So for instance, example 5, my example. I've got 4x squared, so there's a number that's not 1 in front of the x squared. 4x squared plus 16 plus 12. Before I get concerned and think that this is a more difficult problem than it is there a common factor to all of my terms? Yes, 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out that 4 first. If nothing else, it makes my numbers smaller and easier to deal with. When I factor out the 4, 4x squared divided by 4 leaves x squared. 16x divided by 4 leaves 4x. And then 12 divided by 4 leaves 3. Oh, so I just had a trinomial with a 1 in front of the x squared that was wearing a Halloween disguise. Okay. So this 4, by the way, whenever you factor out a common factor, this 4 is part of the final answer. Do not leave it off. That's the most common mistake on this factoring test, is students will factor it out and then leave it out of the answer. So this 4 is part of your final answer. It matters. My x squared plus 4x plus 3, this is exactly the problem we just spent the whole front of this worksheet doing. X squared is x and x. My signs have to be the same. That's what the positive 3 tells me. And they both have to be positive. That's what the 4 tells me. And the two factors of 3 that add up to 4 are 1 and 3, or 3 and 1. The order doesn't matter. So of like problem, do exercise 12 right next door, what to do when there's something that's not 1 in front of that leading term. So between 5w to the third minus 40w to the second plus 60w, what's the common factor? 5 and w. 5w to the third, when I factor out the 5 and the w, leaves me w squared. Negative 40 divided by 5 is negative 8, and w squared, when I factor out one of the w's, leaves me one other one. 60 divided by 5 is 12. And w, when I factor the w, there's no more w. Again, that 5w is part of the answer. Don't leave it off. That makes your problem wrong, unfortunately, because what you get at the end when you multiply should give you what you started with. W squared is w times w. My signs are going to be the same. The 8 tells me they're both going to be negative. And then the two factors of 12 that add up to 8 are going to be 6 and 2 or 2 and 6. Doesn't matter the order. You should have those three factors in whatever order. All right, next problem. Example 6. This is my last example for the day. Example 6 gives me another trinomial. There is a number that's not 1 in front of the x squared. This time, can I factor out a common factor? No. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to let you know, I know many of you come in, you've got plenty of experience factoring. So if you have a method a teacher taught you that's different than mine, that's fantastic. I had Miss Hilliard a long time ago. She's probably retired, so she wouldn't do this to you anymore, but she made us guess and check. That's what she wanted us to do. We had to guess the factors, and I think long-term guess and check is the best way to do it, but short-term, it's the hardest to learn. Okay, so there's other methods. There's the lattice method to do this. There's another method, I don't know the name. If you have a different way, I'm fine with it. What I'm going to show you, if you are unconfident of this or if you've not done a lot of it, I'm going to show you the grouping method, okay, based on what we've already done. Okay, so again, if you don't like this, that's fine. You are not obligated to do this my way. But if you don't, we're going to use what's called the grouping method, or some books call it the A times C method. So here's what you do. What you do for this method is you take this first number and this last number, and you multiply those together. So I'm going to multiply the 3 times the positive 2, and I get positive 6. And the reason I use this method is because at this point, it becomes similar to what we were just doing and the choice we're going to make. And then we get to use grouping. So we use something we already talked about in the previous section. At this point, you're going to pick the two factors of positive 6 that add up to this middle term, just like we were doing a minute ago with the other ones. Okay, only now I have to take into account that there's a number that's not 1 in front of the squared. So 3 times 2 is 6. What are the two factors of 6 that are going to add up to positive 7? Okay, positive 1, positive 6, or positive 6, positive 1. The order absolutely 100% does not matter. You with me so far on why I made that choice? Okay. Now what you do is I'm going to take these two terms and I'm going to use it to split this 3-term polynomial into 4 terms. And here's what I mean. The 3x squared is going to stay the same. But instead of writing 7x, I'm going to use these two numbers. And so I'm going to have plus, I'm going to write this. I know it's not technically proper, but I've got plus 1x plus 6x. Notice, what does 1x and 6x add up to 7x. So I've not changed the problem at all. I'm writing it in a different form. And then I've got a plus 2. Is everybody good with that second step? Okay, so if you're going to use the grouping method or the AC method, however you want to know it, whatever term, the first thing you do is you multiply the first and the lasts, and then you pick the 2 factors of that add up to the middle, just like we were doing. And then you use those 2 factors to create a 4-term polynomial. And the reason we want that is now we can use grouping. And so grouping, what we did a week ago is I grouped the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. What's common to the first 2 terms? An x, great. When I factor an x out of the 3x squared, what's left? Just 3x, yes. When I factor out the x out of the 1x, what's left? Plus 1, great. My second 2 terms, what's the common factor between 6x and 2? Plus 2. 6x divided by 2 leaves 3x. 2 divided by 2 leaves plus 1. I'm going to ask you the same question here that I asked on Tuesday last. Did the grouping work? How do I know the grouping worked? You're right. Got the exact same thing in the parentheses. That's how you know grouping worked. And so here's the very last step then. Since I've got a 3x plus 1 in common, I'm going to factor it out. What's left from the first term when I factor out the 3x plus 1? X. And then from the second term, yes, some of you had already given it to me, the plus 2. There you go. And remember, I'm just not doing it because of time, but this would be a great opportunity to check your answer by foiling. First, outers, inners, last, and you'll get the 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. All right. Again, I don't care what method you're using. I'm going to keep using the grouping method. Okay, so if you want to be doing the same thing as me, that's what I'm going to do. Do exercise 13, please. I'm just going to give you a nudge. I'm not going all the way through the problem. But what is the number that I am looking for factors of? Okay, 5 times positive 6 is plus 30. So what you should be asking yourself now is what factors of positive 30 add up to positive 13? And then use that to group. All right, giving you a second nudge. What are the two factors of 30 that add up to positive 13? Okay, plus 10, plus 3, or plus 3 and plus 10. The order of those two things does not matter at all. So I'm going to now use that. So I've got 5x squared, and then I'm going to have plus 10x, plus 3x, plus 6. If you have plus 3x plus 10x here in the middle, that is totally fine. We will end up in the same place. And now I'm going to give you another 30 seconds or so. Finish factoring that by grouping. All right, so the first two terms have a 5 and an x in common. 5x squared, when I factor out the 5x, leaves x. 10 divided by 5 leaves 2, and x, I factored out the x, there's no more x. Then I have 3x plus 6. Both of those have a 3 in common. 3x divided by 3 is x. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Once again, I noticed the grouping worked. I've got an x plus 2, so I'll factor that out. There's only one of them. I mentioned that last time we talked about grouping. Don't put x plus 2 squared. You're not multiplying anything here. They each have one x plus 2 to give, and then I have 5x plus 3. We good? All right, we're just going to keep practicing. This is the rest of our day, so we got about 25 more minutes. So exercise 14, same thing. Go for it. Have a blast. Don't be afraid to pull out your calculator and mess around with factors if you're having trouble figuring out what two factors to use. I'm just going to get started with the first step, help out anybody who's struggling with this first part. So the first thing I'm going to do is 3 times 14. 3 times 14 gives me positive 42. And I need to figure out the two factors of 42 that are going to add up to 23. Well, you might not see that right at first, and that's okay. I mean, don't think you have to get it right on the first time. If I was doing this, I'd see 42, and right away I'd think 7 times 6. 7 times, does 7 plus 6, does that up to 23? No, so clearly that's not the right pair of factors, but it gives me a start. You got calculators, don't be afraid to use them. The thought process then here goes, okay, 7, it has no other factors, but 6, what is 6? What times what gives you 6? You know this. It's not a trick question. What times what gives you 6? 2 and 3. Yes, thank you very much. And the reason I mention it is just now move one of those factors from the 6 over to the 7. So I'm going to take the 3. So I'm going to take the 3 away from the 6. What's 3 times 7? 21. And you can pop that in your calculator. 42 divided by 21 leaves me 2. Does 21 plus 2, does that add up to 23? Yeah. So I'm just moving factors around. I wouldn't have seen that for, like, I've done this problem before, but the first time I did it, I didn't see it that way. I had to go through the process. Okay, so 21 and 2 are going to be the factors. And what's the sign on both of them going to be? Yeah, because it's a negative 23. It's the same thought process we did all the other problems. I've got the plus 14. That tells me the signs have to be the same. The 23 tells me they both have to be negative. So negative 21 and negative 2, or negative 2 and negative 21. The order there is immaterial. So now let's go ahead and group this, and then I'll give you some more time for the next problem. So here goes. I've got 3x squared, then minus 21x, then minus 2x plus 14. Notice in my middles, the negative 21 and the minus 2, that adds up to minus 23. There's a good checkpoint right there for you. I'm going to group. Hopefully the grouping part looks familiar. Hopefully the new and maybe difficult part is this part of finding the 2 factors so that you can make it a 4-term polynomial. Out of the first 2 terms, I can factor out a 3x. 3x squared, when I factor out the 3x, leaves x. Negative 21 divided by 3 is negative 7. This is something we pointed out when we did the factoring by grouping. So if you haven't watched that video yet, remember to go back and do that. I notice ahead of time that my signs are the opposite of what they should be. I've got a negative in front of the x and a positive in front of the constant. And what I need is a positive x and a negative in front of the constant. So that's what tells me to factor out a negative something. And then 2x and 14 have a 2 in common. Negative 2x divided by negative 2 leaves me positive x. 14 divided by negative 2 is negative 7. Grouping worked. I celebrate. Yeehaw. So I factor out that x minus 7, and then what's left is a 3x from the first term, and then a minus 2 from the second. There's my 2 binomials. All right, try the same thing with exercise 15 right next door. Let's see how you're doing up to this point. So we start off, we've got 4 times positive 35. And you pop out your calculator. 4 times positive 35 is positive 140. And when I do that, I need the 2 factors of 140 that are going to add up to 24. Now, if you're like me, I don't go around knowing all the factors to 140. So I'm just going to start with the most obvious ones I can see. And I see that this number ends in 0. So I'm going to come down here, 10 times 14. Do 10 and 14, does that add up to 24? Yeah, so I got lucky on this one. Okay, maybe you said 70 times 2. That's fine. I'm going to make you this promise on your test that you take in here. Everything's factorable. Okay, there's nothing that you're going to write down not factorable, because I'm trying to teach you to factor and develop confidence for that. Okay, so you better know when something doesn't factor when you're really good at factoring. Okay, so since this is a negative 24, what that means is my signs are going to be negative. So I'm going to have negative 10 and negative 14, or you can reverse that. Negative 14, negative 10 does not matter. I'm now going to use those 2 numbers to break up this middle term. So I've got 4x squared minus 10x minus 14x, and then plus 35. Factor by grouping. Out of the first 2 terms, I can take a 2x. 4x squared, when I factor out 2x, leaves me another 2x. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Once again, this is something we pointed out when we learned about grouping. My next 2 terms have the signs reversed. I've got a negative in front of the x term, a positive in front of the number term. So I need a positive x term and a negative number term. So I'm going to factor out a negative something. And then the 14 and the 35 share a 7. Negative 14 divided by negative 7 is 2. 35 divided by negative 7 is negative 5. Grouping worked as I expected because everything's factorable. So we've got 2x minus 5 and then 2x minus 7. Those are my 2 factors. All right, just a couple more problems. You're almost done with me for another day. Exercise 16. Now I'm going to get you started on this because I've changed one thing, because I'm trying to show you all the different options that you're going to see. So on this one, when I multiply the 12, what am I multiplying the 12 by? You're a step ahead of me. 12 times what? A negative 2. The sign is important. So 12 times negative 2 is negative 24. So what that tells me is, just like earlier today, since it's a negative 24, I'm going to need a number that has a positive and a number that's a negative. So go ahead and figure that out and finish the rest of the problem. right, so on this problem, we've got a negative 24 because 12 times negative 2 is negative 24. So because that's negative, I need factors. One's got to be positive, one's got to be negative, or negative and positive. The order does not matter at all. What does matter is I need my two factors to add up to a negative 5. So what are those two factors going to be? Okay, positive 3, negative 8. The reason why, positive 3 times negative 8 is negative 24. Positive 3 plus negative 8 is negative 5, which I have in the middle. So those are the right two factors. Great job. So I have 12m squared plus 3m minus 8m minus 2. Factor by grouping. Out of the first two terms, I can take a 3m. 12 divided by 3 leaves 4m. 3m divided by 3m leaves plus 1. We talked about that last time too. Don't forget that 1. That's important. I notice both of my last terms are negative, so I need to factor a negative something out. And 8 and 2 share a 2. So negative 8 divided by negative 2 is 4m. And then negative 2 divided by negative 2 is plus 1. So you can see, I think, once you get decent at grouping, okay, you've done the homework, taken the quiz for the grouping section, the hardest part to this is figuring out what factors you've got to use. Okay, sometimes that can be a challenge. Just be patient and diligent and do that. The grouping worked. So I've got my 4m plus 1. And what's left from the first term is 3m, from the second term, minus 2. All right, we're down to our final two problems. You're doing great. Exercise 17 should be fairly straightforward like the others. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to work exercise 17. Factor that, please. All right, so starting out, I've got my 8 times my negative 3. 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. Again, that sign matters. That's why I'm paying particular attention to it. Since that's a negative 24, I know that my signs have to be a negative and a positive, or a positive and a negative. The order is not going to matter. What I do know is my two factors of 24 have to be 10 apart, looking over here. So what factors of 24 are 10 apart? Negative 12, positive 2. Thank you. Perfect. So now I've got 8y squared minus 12y plus 2y, and then minus 3. Factoring by grouping. Between 8y squared and 12y, I've got a 4y in common. 8 divided by 4 is 2y. Negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. Notice there's nothing in common to the last two terms, but what I have there is the same thing as in parentheses. So I'm just going to slop some parentheses around it here so that it looks good. And the grouping worked because I got the same thing both times. So I've got 2y minus 3. What's left from the first term is 4y, and then from the last term, plus 1, and we're golden. Last problem. Before you get going on the grouping method with the last problem, what would you suggest I do to make the last problem as easy to look at as possible? Yeah, let's factor out that negative. So first step, all of us do, factor out that negative out of the whole thing. When you do that, negative 6x squared, I factor out the negative, that's 6x squared. Negative 13x, I factor out the negative, that's plus 13x. Then 5, I factor out the negative, that's negative 5. Now I'm going to ignore that negative. I'm just going to draw a little arrow. That negative is part of my final answer. Okay, you can't just discard it. Now what I want you to do, I'm going to give you 2 minutes just for time's sake. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do as much as you can as far as the factoring of 6x squared plus 13x minus 5. You're going to do it exactly like we've done the other problems. All right, time flies when you're having fun. So let's finish this up. 6 times negative 5 gives me a negative 30. So I need the two factors of a negative 30. So first off, I notice it's a negative. So that means I'm going to have a negative factor and a positive, or a positive and a negative. The order doesn't matter. And I need the two factors of 30 that are 13 apart. So the two factors of 30 that are 13 apart are 2 and 15. I'm going to insert those. So I've got 6x squared minus 2x plus 15x minus 5. I will now group that. I'm going to group the first two and the last two. Out of the first two terms, between the 6x squared and the 2x, 6 and 2 share a 2, and they both have an x to give. 6 divided by 2 leaves me 3x. Negative 2x divided by 2x is negative 1. 15 and 5 share a 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3x. And negative 5 divided by 5 is negative 1. Once again, the grouping works, which makes me happy because it's the last problem of the day. So this is the negative I'm being reunited with that we factored out at the very beginning of the problem. So now I've got a 3x minus 1 that's in common. And what's left from the first term is a 2x, and from the last term is a 5. And there is my fully factored trinomial.